So good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to our special Zoom sessions that we're running for 4 Friday nights on behalf of Loughgall Football Club. And tonight we have a very, very special topic and two incredibly special guests tonight. I'm absolutely delighted with both Alfie and Pat being able to join us. So just to set the scene, these webinars came out of conversations among our development coaches. Gary had the suggestion that we need to put something on for players and just to keep them connected with the club, keep them connected with football. These are difficult times, strange times. I don't think anybody really has walked the path that we've had to walk as a society these past sort of 9-10 months. And we just wanted to provide just an opportunity for the Loughgall sort of player community to get together with the coaches and see each other. That's part of it, but also hear from some guests and really get some value. So last week we had the first team manager and the club captain, Dean Smith and Stephen Ferguson. We had a discussion around breaking into the first team, and that was really valuable, Gary, listening to Dean and to Stephen. I think people really had fantastic feedback from that.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. And again, the other side of it is the connection that we want to achieve with the club and to have your first team manager and your skipper come on and be so open and at the same time so interactive. They were relaxed and very informal, which is a massive plus for everybody at the club.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tonight the topic is football mentality and mental health. And this really is an important topic. 15-20 years ago, when you talked about mental health, probably wasn't really a cool topic. People didn't really discuss it. Now, within the world of football and even in wider society, this has become a very relevant topic because of how it's impacted on people's lives, and families, and even just in society in general. And we're going to be discussing mental health, but also the mentality that players need to be the best they can be initially, but the mentality they need to be a successful Irish League player or across the water. And we have people on tonight from our National League teams, 12, 13-year-old, right up to the first team. And without a shadow of a doubt, tonight you will receive value out of listening to our two speakers. So, Gary, I know we've discussed this topic. I know it's a topic that we've discussed a lot as coaches, given the context of COVID. I mean, it's really good tonight to be able to discuss this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And for me, it was absolutely massive that we got people on board, as you say. And previously in the club, we have had these conversations, and Alfie was there many a time and had fantastic sort of presentation for the boys whenever we've done it before. But to get Pat on board as well, as Pat is pushing this so much, is massive. And it's so important for everybody to listen tonight, because more so what I said last week is something similar, that if we get out the other side of this and we're in a good shape and you're in a good place, just by listening tonight, you might find something different to get you into that better place. But for me, if we get over this and we get through the other side, there's very little else in life that is going to throw at you that you hopefully won't be able to stand in the way of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just so everyone is aware how we work this, I'll introduce both the guests with a couple of slides, just so particularly the younger players, you understand who the guests are. And then we'll move in to just discuss some topics. But we do want interaction. Part of the reason we're doing this is we want interaction with everybody. And it's a matter of get your questions into the chat box, or I know some have sent questions directly to Gary. And where we can, we want to unmute people and let them ask the question directly to Pat, directly to Alfie on camera. And that really just gets sort of everybody involved. And that's really what we want to do tonight. So let's start initially. Let me introduce, first of all, Alfie Stewart. Certainly for the older generation, probably doesn't need a huge introduction. But let me run through a couple of slides, and then I'll ask him to comment on his career. But Alfie's played junior football initially for Bridgend United, Meola Park at 16, then was spotted by a Glentoran scout, ended up at the Oval. Now, when we think about football mentality, Alfie has 21 Irish League winners' medals. So I think when it comes to mentality of winning, mentality of being at the top of your game in the Irish League, there's not too many have a medal haul like that, even in the big clubs. 4 Irish League titles, 5 Irish Cup medals, and he's won that many. He's forgot the rest of them. He doesn't even know what the rest of them are. But it's in around. He's definitely got 21 medals, and he's the only player apparently to win the double with a Belfast club and then a provincial club. So no doubt he'll comment on that in a minute. Now, Alfie initially came to fame with Glentoran. Obviously went there as a young 16, 17-year-old, 6 seasons. And by the time he left there in his early 20s, he had won 4 Irish Cup winners, and they were basically 4 in a row, and 1 league medal. And maybe later on we'll come back and play a wee clip of the celebrations after one of the cups. But certainly he played in one of the most successful Glentoran teams in the club's history, and was an integral part of that. He then finished off his career with Coleraine, Ballymena, Myola Park, Ballymena Reserves coach, and then he's obviously helping us out here at Loughgall. So have I missed anything in your career, Alfie, there, have I?
Not really, Davy. Thanks for the bad performances.
You see, we had a rule on this webinar that we weren't going to mention our noisy neighbours from Shamrock Park, so I had to just skip over that part of your career. But no, we better be fair and mention your Portadown career. So obviously, yeah. So when you be played for one of the big clubs in Brownstown, and Gary was saying he didn't know you played for Hanover, but Gary.
That's right, DJ. That's all week we looked over. I was trying to find archives of him playing for the biggest team in Brownstown Road, but there was definitely no pictures in the Hanover kit, like so.
But no, obviously an absolute legend at Portadown, 3 league titles, Irish Cup winner, and obviously I know that club plays a big part in your past, Alfie, and is obviously close to your heart. We understand that, but I have to say this before I let you in. I have to say this: my most favourite picture, because it was a coup to get you to come and work with Loughgall development squads. It was brilliant working with you, but I think my favorite photograph of you and me has to be this one, where I got you posing for a selfie in a Loughgall badge at Shamrock Park in front of the diehards beating the drum. And I thought, you know what, he's now converted to a Loughgall player, so Loughgall supporter. So there we are. I'm sure that the guys on will like that one.
I think you were more danger. You were in more danger that day than me, to be honest with you.
Probably. That's nothing new. But listen, Alfie, your career, phenomenal career. Just by way of introduction, just maybe a couple of highlights of your career, and I suppose maybe how you end up at Glentoran. Maybe it's a good place to start, and then we'll move on to Pat in a minute.
I will. It's interesting, DJ. I ended up, and this is very important, I suppose, for the young lads that are here tonight, because as I say, I started off at Bridgend, just a local club in Macra. Got a chance to go to Myola, slightly bigger club playing intermediate league football. But lo and behold, there was this opportunity, and this is very important for the young fellas who are listening tonight. And I would stress this, and I've said this to young players before, that whether it's a friendly, whether it's a trials match, to me, there's no such thing as a friendly or any game of any nature that whereby you shouldn't be giving your all. And the reason why I say that is because I was spotted in such a game. There's a trials match up at Coleraine University way back 1982, October 1982. I went along. Didn't really know what we were going to. There's 5 or 6 players out of our club going. Lo and behold, I cut a long story short, we had no idea who was there. I was never renowned for my goal scoring, even at school or at club football. I was always a midfielder or a defender. And on that particular night, because I took the whole thing very seriously, I never ever went out onto a football pitch other than with the passion to do my best and to win. And amazingly, I scored a hat-trick that night of goals outside the box. But what I didn't know, David, was that the Glentoran scout was there that night, and he approached me immediately after the game and asked me to come down and to play a match for Glentoran Seconds to see how it would go. So there's a lesson for every kid that's listening tonight. You never quite know who's watching you. You never quite know what's around the corner. You never quite know what's going to happen. If every time you cross that white line, you give it your all. And that's exactly what happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, very much so. We have obviously known each other for many years. We've been friends, and I've often said of all the people I know in football, and I know a fair few, but sort of was fortunate enough to play under some very good managers and with some very good players. But your sort of mentality of football, the topic we're talking about tonight, has been head and shoulders above anyone else I know. Just the way you approach the game and the mentality you have towards the game. So looking forward to unpicking that tonight, to the value of the players and coaches that are on here tonight.
Yeah, no, fire away. As I said, I can only sum it up, David, by simply saying that from I was a kid, when I first kicked the ball, till I last kicked the ball, and even now, you saw me somehow or other, whenever it came to Saturdays, whenever we were working with Loughgall under 20s, the passion was there. Once you get into that environment, there was a passion as a kid, there was a passion as a player whenever you were an established footballer, and the passion is still here. Whenever you get me on the sideline or whatever, it's there. Even tonight, you'll hear me talking passionately about the game, and I don't think you should be involved in anything. I don't care what it is. If you're in a sport, whatever you're doing in life, do it with a passion, and you will, as you rightly say, you'll fulfill your potential, and that's what every kid should want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, moving on then to Pat, and again, absolutely delighted, Pat, you're able to join us tonight. Really appreciate that. So Pat initially signed a pro contract with Portadown as a young 18-year-old. Was then sold to Manchester United for 100,000, which in those days was a big fee. So you obviously impressed over there in terms of Alec Ferguson and the setup over there. Made your first team debut against York, and in that team was Beckham that night. So the young players obviously know who David Beckham is. Well, Pat played alongside David Beckham. The current United manager, Ole Gunnar, there's Pat in the team photograph with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So Pat's been right at the heart and been a number of years at one of the most successful clubs in England. So in terms of his experience and his knowledge, obviously he's absolutely top drawer. He eventually moved from United to Wigan. Wigan paid about 380 grand, which again in those days was big money. And 5 seasons there, 200 odd appearances, won the league with them, Auto Windshield Trophy. So again, knows what it is to be in a successful team. Then obviously come back home here to the province, went to Portadown, moved to Glentoran, won the league with Glentoran, another cup. And then Pat's been involved in a variety of management roles. Assistant at Monaghan Town, Lurgan Celtic, Newry, and of course at Portadown. So again, vastly experienced. And what I actually didn't know, Pat, was that you have 7 full Northern Ireland caps. That's something I didn't know until I checked Wikipedia. So
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic, Pat. So delighted to have you on board, Pat. And what can you sort of give us a quick overview of your career and how you enjoyed it, and just some key highlights?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've been very fortunate and very privileged, I would say. Obviously as a kid growing up, and especially when I went to Portadown, I was very fortunate to have the likes of Alfie, Stewart and Brian Strain within the first team. So people like that, they inspired you, and that was hugely important. And again, just listening to Alfie there, it's interesting because at 17 years of age at Portadown's youth team, David, I couldn't get in the Portadown's youth team. There were lads that were a year younger than me that were getting into the team. In fact, there were 5 who were schoolboy internationals that were getting in the team ahead of me. And I remember on one occasion at 17 years of age, we sat and it was a youth cup final game. And Trevor, both Trevor and Gary McKinstry were up front for the youth team that particular night. But on the bench, and I couldn't make it onto the first 11. I was on the bench, and alongside me was a lad called Peter Kennedy. Now, Peter ended up again playing for Northern Ireland and played for Wigan actually with myself. So at 17, we couldn't make it into the youth team, and then I took a bit of a growth spurt at 18, and with that, my confidence grew. So I would have been a late developer. So at 18 then, was playing for the youth team captain. The youth team won the youth cup, the Harry Cavan Youth Cup, and at that stage then was invited over on trial to Manchester United. Are you still there, David? Yeah.
Listen, I think what you said there, Pat, is absolutely really interesting, because this I think one of the biggest challenges in youth football today is that, and some of this comes with parents, let's be honest, but parents can be a challenge. Listen, I take my hat off to parents who are so dedicated to take their kids all over the country training and playing. So on that side, I take my hat off to them. But certainly in recent years, I know within football and youth coaching with this discussion, the parents want success immediately. If a kid's on the bench at 14 for 2 weeks in a row, they're knocking on the door of the coach. My kid shouldn't be on the bench. My kid should be playing. And to think that somehow the opportunity is going to pass them by if they're on the bench, that you're saying as a 17-year-old, you're on the bench for Portadown and yet still had a full-time career in England and played for Man United. Like that's a very, very interesting point.
And it's what was amazing as well was I made, I think, the last 30 of the Northern Ireland schoolboy international squad, but was considered too small at centre back to then make it into the squad itself. But out of that group, I think there was maybe 18 or 20 of that international schoolboy group. There was only one that made it over in England, and the other two lads that made careers for ourselves over in England were myself and the lad Jordan McMahon. Now, Jordan and myself didn't make it into the schoolboy panel. So it just shows that, that late development, you only have to look at the likes of, Jamie Vardy coming into the league so late on. If you have that passion for it, as Alfie said, and you focus on it, then it may not happen straight away, but you will end up surpassing a lot of your teammates if you continue with that passion, because what passion does is it gives you the opportunity to get past setbacks. Whenever you have a passion, you will get up, you'll get up a lot quicker because you'll want to succeed at it. And the vast majority of people who are successful because they have that resilience to get up and get through those disappointments, because again, as we talk about, they're so passionate about the game.
Yeah, no. Hey, Alfie, when you moved to Glentoran, before we move on with sort of what Pat does at the minute and spends time doing with mental health, but when you moved to Glentoran as a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, were you on the bench a few times for the reserves? How much were you on the bench for the first team? And I know you broke in quite quickly, but there must have been some disappointments on the way.
There was. When I went in October 1982 to the reserves, and I must admit it was quite, like every level of football, it was quite a shock to the system. It was difficult, really hard, the pace of the game, the quality of the players you were playing against. And I thought I was struggling, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was going to, initially, I didn't think I was going to cope at that level. But somehow or other, they saw something in me, happy enough to sign me, and away I went. But within 6 months, I was very fortunate. I think the Glens were preparing for a cup final in 1983. And I got a call up into the first team squad. Those were the days, of course, whenever there was only one substitute. So if you were getting a call to go into the first team squad, you were doing really well. It wasn't a case of going up and sitting amongst 6 or 7 substitutes. So that was fantastic for me. So at the end of that season, I had something like 6 appearances under my belt, and that was a great boost to a young lad who was only there for a few months. You know what I mean? It was incredible. But I got the chance. Can I just touch on that there before we move on? Pat's at a great point about late developers. Whenever I started at Bridgend, Miola were our next door neighbours as a club just down the road, and it was sort of the next stage up to move to them. At Bridgend, we had more or less a very strong youth team, but one by one, Miola were coming and picking boys out of the youth team and taking them. And I slowly but surely, all my teammates and friends were disappearing at Miola, but nobody had asked me. I was getting a wee bit dismayed, a wee bit disconcerted about this. But eventually their coach came and asked me. I was the 6th or 7th player that they asked. But young boys need to hear this also, is that whilst I was the last to go to Miola from that team, I was the first to leave for Irish League football about a year later. So there you have another case of that later development, I suppose, that quicker development, I should say. So it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And as both of you said, probably the passion and mentality you had to be successful was a driver, and we'll definitely be coming on to that later on. So initially, I want to talk a little bit about sort of mental health. I think it's a good place to start, and then we'll circle back around and really get into the football and success and passion and the right mentality. But in terms of training to be smart, I know, Pat, this is very much sort of your passion. You've been at the highest level of the game. You played for Northern Ireland. You played for Manchester United. You've been in the environment of world-class players. Good career yourself in England. I know you have a passion to sort of provide support to young men and young women, but particularly young men in terms of this football environment. And so just explain, what is this Train to Be Smart, and just give us an idea of what you do and the service you provide.
Yeah, okay. So basically, Train to Be Smart is a mental health charity, sporting charity, which promotes positive mental health and builds resilience through sport. You know, and I think that sport is such a great medium for actually building resilience. You know, in practical terms, it helps, as we said, within that connectivity and making sure that people are connected. You've got the physical element of it. You know, and it basically what it does is it just builds character within players. Like we've touched on things like passion, you know, but also things even surrounding empathy and actually knowing your teammates and knowing where their strengths are and helping from that perspective, Davey, are really important parts of it. So that's what Train to Be Smart does. It's a mental health charity which builds resilience. But a lot of the time, and this is why, you know, the picture up there of myself and Roy, and at that stage and in that picture in particular, I was probably going through quite a tough time. And that's where the charity started. And I hadn't spoken to Roy, I would say maybe 13, 14 years. And picked up the phone, spoke to him, and he says, yeah, I'll do it, come over. And again, whilst we hadn't spoken in 13, 14 years, that's the thing about football, is it gives you that connection and you get to know people in a way that even 13 years later, they're prepared to do things for you. You know, and I don't think he would have done it if maybe we wouldn't have got on, but that's that whole thing surrounding empathy. So teammates are so important, and within this charity, it's about giving them those character skills. And I'm sure a lot of the players on here, you know, have character skills that they probably don't realise they have as well. You know, and it's really getting that out of them. The coaches will see it in them at times. And the one thing I would always say within coaches is, don't just see the player, see the person as well, you know, because there's so many great skills that you can pick up from character. And Alfie will know this. You know, I always remember as a footballer watching Alfie, and he was the most committed man to tackle I ever seen. All he seen was the ball. Now, sometimes lads went up in the air as well, but you know, that was the thing. There was total commitment to him, and I picked up on all these wee character traits. So what we're trying to do with Train to Be Smart is give players the wee pieces beyond the wee building blocks that maybe taking away the tactical skills, you know, and the tactical awareness, but having those mental and emotional skills are just as important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, Alfie, I'm right in saying you and Pat had one game at Portadown together. So obviously before Pat went to United, is that right?
I think so, Pat. And maybe he remembers it too. I think at the Oval, I think you made your debut, Pat.
That's right, yeah.
I think Spooner was injured or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Can you remember the result, Pat?
I have to say, I do, yeah. I think it was 0-8. I came on in that, and Ronnie wasn't a bit stupid, because I'd been on trial at Manchester United that week before, and obviously it did fairly well. I think it was Mark and Daly and Atkinson, God rest them, and Dwight York. They were playing for the Aston Villa reserves against us, and it did quite well. So when I got back from that trial, Ronnie put me straight away into the first team squad, probably to get the numbers up a wee bit. But yeah, it was 0-8. Yeah, I think it was Mark and Gary first.
Gary McCartney.
Yeah, it certainly was 0-8 anyway. Yeah, but it was 0-8 definitely.
I would say you guided me through that one, Pat. You were very good that day, son.
Well, I did your running.
Nothing new there then. Nothing new there. Well, while we're kind of on the mental health side, and we'll deal with all this, and then we'll go on to the football really focused. In terms of COVID, we'll ask sort of Pat first, and then Alfie, because both of you move in sort of different circles in Northern Ireland. How has COVID affected particularly young footballers, Pat? Because you obviously mix a lot with them and things like that. So how have you, and any suggestions you could give the players on the call, right from youth up to first team, to sort of cope with the current climate?
Yeah, well, obviously we're still able to do some physical activity, even though it has to be on your own or within a very small group. So so within that, keeping that level of physical activity, a lot of what I do within Train to Be Smart revolves around the 5 steps to well-being. So one of that is obviously be active, stay connected, learn new things. So even just trying something different, like maybe trying a different language or picking up an instrument and trying to learn a wee bit about it, just trying new things, taking notice of all the great things around you whenever you do be active, is important. And the other one, which I didn't realize was so important, but whenever I started, obviously the charity of Train to Be Smart, the other one is give. So giving, whether that's the community, whether that's the charity, giving your time, it actually makes you feel better, so it surrounds those 5 things. What I would say to the group and to the lads that are playing is, it's a time to get out just with a ball and stay connected with that ball, but also stay connected with your friends virtually, because it is difficult times. The other thing is keeping some sort of routine, because routine is important as well. And if you can keep in that routine and just try different things, as much as I'm old school and I'm not big in the whole, I suppose, the iPad and social media and all of that, there is good parts of it, and it can be a great learning experience as well, Davey. So that would be my my main points.
Good. Alfie, so in your area, what are footballers doing, or how are they keeping busy?
Well, it's been difficult. I was speaking to a guy recently who came to the door to leave off something, David, and he had only started coaching, funny enough, Miola under-20s, but he never got at it at all, really. It's been a terrible start for him, asking how he's coping. He says, well, it's not easy. His own son had just been discarded by Crusaders, and he's had no chance whatsoever to pick up on that disappointment. So that's not easy, that's very difficult. So Pat rightly says, you keep positive, do things that are positive, do things that'll bring a smile to your face, bring a smile to other people's faces. He touched on the point about getting out there and being active if you can. If you're not a walker, start walking. I'm an avid walker, have been for many a year, and I've been able to do that and continue to do that. But as for young athletes, it's very difficult, but you've got to get out there. And just to touch on the point about social media, to touch about the empathy you have with former players. I'm part of a couple of WhatsApp groups from my former clubs, and that's been fantastic. It's been really good, not just for myself, but for so many ex-players and stuff. So it's important that the young lads, the teammates that they have at present, and the teammates they've had in the past, even the coaches, it's very important to keep in touch with your coaches. You know what I mean? Ask for their advice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And just basically keep in touch with people. It's so worthwhile.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Gary, I know the questions are coming in there, so you can call who you want to, maybe if they're willing to unmute themselves, ask the question directly, or if you're asking on their behalf, I'll let you ask the first couple.
Yeah, well, just at the stage that we're at, probably the one that comes to mind would be Thomas Beaumont. Is Thomas on? Thomas, you want to unmute yourself? Thomas, sir?
If he's not there, so just go ahead and ask it yourself, sir.
Yes, I'll go ahead. So Thomas had asked, with dealing with adversity, how does it help progress your career? So I suppose in this sort of time, for both of you would be then, in this sort of type of adversity, what sort of steps or advice could you give for what comes next after this is over?
Go ahead, Pat. You fire away.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I suppose that thing surrounding adversity, and I'll touch. Obviously, I spoke about Train to Be Smart, but as part of and founding Train to Be Smart, just to give you a bit of relevance, I suppose my brother in my first year at Manchester United took his own life. Now, it was a very, very difficult thing to deal with. But what it did was, I suppose, as it went on, was it put things into perspective, and there's things that we can control and things that we can't. And from a footballing perspective, you know, you will win games and you will lose games, and that's the great thing about football, because especially when you continue to play it, you realize that you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, you know, you're going to have ups and downs, but it's how you deal with those. It's so important. And again, you know, as footballers, we can train as hard as possible. We can have really good teammates. We can be in winning teams. We can be in teams that maybe don't win so many games. But it brings so much to the table that it actually helps you to deal with adversity, especially when you step back after games and you evaluate things. You know, just reflect on it, and reflect on how that actually is building resilience, is actually helping with the adversity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole topic of adversity around football is something we're going to obviously discuss this with both Alfie and Pat before the Zoom call tonight. You know, so Pat mentioned he had to deal with a real tragedy within his family with his brother, you know, taking his life, and that's unfortunately something that's become so prevalent, much more than it should be in recent years in the province, and I'm sure almost every school and almost every player on the call, you know, knows someone, particularly, you know, with the lad up at Carrick, you know, last year, he played Portadown as well, things like that. I mean, it is very, very difficult. I know, Alfie, in your own situation, you were sort of still involved in football. Your son was at Ballymena whenever you suffered a family tragedy.
That's right, David. It's just a little over 12 years ago. And I'm just thinking, as Pat mentioned, about it was his first year at Manchester United. It was my son's first steps in Irish League football. And his mum was driving him to what was really one of his first big games against Linfield. But to cut a long story short, she died suddenly at the wheel of the car. And that thrust our family into an awful time of grief and trouble and adversity, for the want of better words. But, you know, thankfully, I'm a man of strong faith. I believe in the Lord. I trust in God. And we look to him in the midst of that adversity. But it was not easy. And I must remember, as a parent, I looked at my son taking his first steps as a footballer, and that was very, very difficult. You know, and even now, when I think back on it, it must have been really, really hard. That particular week, he started his first job, got his first car, and at the end of that week, he lost his mother. So it was an awful hard time for him. But I'm looking back now, I'm essentially proud of the way that he dealt with it. It wasn't easy. You know what I mean? Life does throw these troubles and these trials at us. It was far from easy for us as a family. As I say, I was working at Ballymena at the time as reserve team manager. And thankfully, David, I can say this just as I'm sitting here thinking about it. Those initial months after my wife's death, I was so glad of the involvement in football. It really was an outlet for me. Just one night a week or whatever it was at that time, and then Saturday, just for an hour and a half, 2 hours, taking my mind off the awful things that we were enduring. And that's, as Pat has rightly touched on already, the real benefits, the real joys, the real pleasures of being involved with people, around people who have a like mind of yourself, a passion the same as yourself. But it was so important for me at that time, certainly being involved in football. Yes, there came a time whenever I had to step away for other reasons or whatever. But you know, in times of adversity, I just thank God that he was with me. But I thank God for again, touching what Pat has said, the empathy of teammates. I'll say this before I move on, is that I can remember well, so important to me at that time too was the friendship with my former teammates. I can remember teammates of mine coming and taking me out for a meal, simple things like that, just old friendships that are still alive and well to this very day. And that's what happens in football. You have these bonds, you have these friendships, and they're worth their weight in gold. I'm so thankful for them.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Gary, any more questions, please?
The rest, DJ, are sort of towards football. So do we want to let's
move on to football.
Let them come in when they're relevant, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'll kick it off, and then we'll get right into the football stuff there. So mentality in football. So for Pat and Alfie, we've got, you know, young players on from our National League teams right up to first team players. And yet the principles don't change. I know, Alfie, we have had so many hours of conversations on phones and face to face, and Pat, this is something that I have used for years when I've been coaching and managing. I've been trying to attract players. I'll talk about, we always talk the 4 key sort of components of a successful team: technical, tactical, physical. But I've said for years, and people can vouch this, that I don't see enough training on the mental side. You get hours and hours of technical training, and every coach in the world will put a million cones out, and they'll teach people how to control the ball and pass and movement, and then move in a bit of tactical, a bit of fitness. But very rarely, when you look at a training schedule, is there mentality. And at Loughgall, there's been nights where it's been a Thursday night training night, and we haven't touched the ball. We've went into the clubhouse and we've talked about mentality. We've talked about game preparation. Where one night, Alfie sort of led it, just talking about experiences, but really trying to get the players to understand that the athlete, and Pat, I'll ask you to deal with this first. Great quote. The athlete it's the mind, it's not the body. So much focus on the body, but the winning mentality and to be a top elite player, the real athlete, what you have to train is the mind. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is the thing about it. I have seen very, I suppose, average players, at a younger age, making it, as I said, then further in and actually going and playing, over in England and doing really good things through a growth mentality. And the growth mentality is, the grow model is, goal, reality, opportunity, and a way forward. And again, it goes back to that whole thing surrounding passion, which, looking at that, that's brilliant. But even emotionally, what you need within that mental and even emotional part of it is you need clarity in what you're doing, and that's why this is very important. How you live your life surrounding football will also have a big bearing on how you actually do then when it comes to your sort of mental preparation. So we talk about all the things like sleep, about the correct diet and water, and making sure watching in terms of alcohol and all of those drugs misuse, all of those. But the mental and emotional, I've a great saying, there's a fine line between self-confidence and arrogance. And what you tend to find is whenever you're self-aware, then you will know exactly where you're at, and you'll know the steps that you need to take then, whether that's to work on your technical skills, obviously to learn more tactically. But whenever you have that, and I'll just, I suppose, to emphasize this, I'll tell a little story. I was over seeing Alex Ferguson in 2017, and we talked about that group. You'd shown the team photo, Davy, that United squad. So you had David Beckham, you had Paul Scholes, you had the two Nevilles, you have Ollie Gunnar, Eric Cantona, Roy Keane, Giggsy, could go through them all, But the gaffer said to me, he says, the thing about that group was they didn't play for the money. He says they eventually commanded the money. He says, but they played because they loved the game, and that's an emotional trait as much as anything else. It's that love for the game. The mental ones, in terms of desire, in terms of confidence. You know what? Alfie will tell you this: confidence is a huge issue, and sometimes you will lose it. Davey, you lose confidence. But if you continue to work hard, that will come back, because as you improve in quality, then yes, you will still have bad games, but that confidence will always come back as long as you continue to work hard. So I hope that answers the question. But I thought, just letting the kids know as well about, the way that the gaffer thought about it. I sometimes look at the young kids and think, why are they playing the game? And I'll sometimes ask the lads this, so why are you playing the game? Oh, I want a big car and a big house. And I'm like, well, that's not the right starting point. Alfie will tell you, you just have to love the game, So that mentality, that mental and emotional awareness, and awareness of self is much more important, I suppose, than not. Well, it's certainly one of the facets of the whole thing of making it into the elite level sport.
Yeah, no, it is. But before I bring Alfie in, I just want to make two very brief comments. I mean, the conversations that we have had over the years, Alfie and Gary, in terms of players at Loughgall, and obviously I won't mention any players, but there's been players that you'll both know that score very highly on technical, tactical, and physical. But when we've had our coaches chat, it's been like, doesn't have the mentality, doesn't either want it bad enough, doesn't take it serious enough, or just doesn't have what I just call that winning mentality, that desire to improve, to listen, to be teachable, but also have maybe the arrogance that Pat talked about. And there's obviously, we've had a couple of players leave the club over the last couple of years, and it's fair to say we've been happy enough to see them go, because we had decided early on that they just didn't have the mentality that we felt was needed. So you're obviously huge in mentality. We're going to play a clip in a few minutes of if it plays, of halftime team talk, Alfie, you give. But just to set it up in terms of mentality, why have you always felt that's a key component of a successful footballer?
Oh, it's everything, David, because as Pat rightly said earlier on, in football, no matter what level you play at, there'll be highs and there'll be lows. There'll be times when you're confident. There'll be times when the confidence is knocked. You'll have to come back from injury. There's so many things, so many changing things in football. You've got to be fit to deal with it. You've got to be mentally strong. And I think, and I keep using this, and I apologize for using it so often, is that the thing that'll override all those lows and all those difficulties and all those things that come in, even away from football, is a passion. If you have a passion for it, you'll go back for more. You'll keep coming back. You'll be like the boxer who gets knocked down. You'll come up for more. I just want to tell a wee story about what I learned. Aaron, my son, came up from Ballymena for me. He was 11 years of age till he quit playing at 25. And I remember being asked a question one day. I used to go and take him to the Lisburn League, playing against some strong teams. I was asked a question by one of the parents standing on the sideline one day. And he said to me, it was a good question actually, he says, out of our team, he says, how many do you think have got a chance? They must have been at this stage about 14 or 15 years of age. How many of these lads do you think have got a chance of being Irish League players or beyond? I says, honestly, I think about 3. Why is that? I says, because most of them don't have a real desire. They're coming here on a Saturday, they're turning up, but they don't really want to be here for whatever reason, whatever the reason was. But as it turned out, David, I watched closely. I remember the 3 players that I mentioned did become Irish League players. And he said to me, what about such and such a young guy who was highly thought of at the club? It goes back to the point you made earlier. And he scored goals for fun at school level, scored goals for fun at youth level. And he says, what do you think of him? I says, he has no chance. He wasn't playing at 18 years of age. So I was right. But to me, it was easy to spot it. Now, they can change. These young lads can learn lessons and they can develop that mental strength by simply, maybe learning lessons on the field or off the field, whatever it might be. But that was just a thing that came to my mind about that particular team. I named 3 guys who I thought, you never can quite know for sure, might make it as Irish League players, and all 3 of them did, and the rest of them didn't.
Interesting. So I think I'm going to play this video now, Gary. Is there any questions there sort of regarding for the mentality itself or dealing with difficulties during games or anything?
There's actually 2 or 3, but Pat answered it brilliantly in terms of one was obviously when you are feeling low and your confidence is down, how do you how do you rebuild it and how do you go about maintaining it? But Pat spoke well about over at United and how that sort of worked, and then Alfie came in that too. But I suppose there is another one from Matty Willis. Is Matty there? Does he want to ask it, or will I fire away?
I am here, yeah.
Go on ahead,
I
Matty.
can ask it, sure, yeah. So how did you prepare mentally before a game to help get you in your best focused state for the game?
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, look, I mean, I think from being proactive, Matty, I think the biggest one was looking after myself the 48 hours before games and making sure that we're doing the right thing, getting the relevant amount of sleep, making sure that the food intake, making sure you were getting your water on board, that side of things. When it came to the closer to games, and Alfie will actually tell you this, I mean, players get nervous. I remember Roy Keane was over, did the fundraiser, and he said, people think that people like Roy Keane were fearless, but Alfie will tell you nerves happen. You know, Mickey Keenan, the best goalkeeper in the Irish League for a long time. Mickey used to be sick before every game, and it was, you know, so everybody responds differently. I was quite quiet. Funny enough, going back to the whole confidence issue, you know, whenever I was confident and had a run of games, you know, I just made sure that I trained, or I got out to the warm up and got plenty of touches of the ball. And when it came to the first touch of the ball in the game, that I did the simple thing well, because I think that starts you off even within a game, you know. So I didn't, when I was playing with less confidence, then I was more nervous. But there was a certain amount of nerves, but nerves are quite healthy. You know, it's just being able to control those nerves. And as I say, you know, when you get that first touch and make sure that it's a good one, and it might be a simple touch, then it usually will bring you into the game. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, cheers. So it's just all about getting confidence pretty much in your first touch and stuff.
Yeah, because confidence is bred through repetition of good practice, and you know, once you do that, and the more practice you gain, then once it comes into the game, it's just a matter of repeating that. Now that's not always as simple as it sounds. I understand that, but the most important thing is that whenever you are playing and you're repeating that, then know that even if you're lacking in confidence, then that will come through as you continue to work hard.
Yeah.
Matty, can I just say, a lesson I learned throughout my career was, you know, when you're preparing for a game, it starts obviously with you kids maybe on a Tuesday, maybe on a Thursday. You know, you do your hard work, and then you're preparing for the match, doing all the tactical stuff and the ball work on a Thursday night, and you feel absolutely fantastic through the week. And I always had this fear of waking up on a Saturday morning and not quite feeling physically good. That happened pretty often. Thereby, you had a problem. How do you deal with that mentally? You know, you feel like you wake up on a Saturday morning and you go, oh, what's wrong? You maybe feel lethargic. You maybe just don't feel yourself. And that was a big, you know, and maybe you felt that yourself as a young kid going out to play. You know, you prepared absolutely first class all week, but somehow or other come kickoff time, it doesn't feel quite right. That's whenever you've got to kick in with the mentality thing. I've got to do what I can here, get a level of performance that is pleasing for your coach. Find a level, even with your physical state, your mental stability. Get a performance that's pleasing to you and pleasing to your coach, because there's no guarantee, no matter how hard you work, that you're going to turn up on a Saturday, or you're going to turn up at the start of a match feeling 100%. Such as the human body, such as the human mind, even. You know what I mean? And as Pat rightly says, so much of it is about confidence. He hit on a great point about your first involvement in the game, your first touch, your first header, your first tackle. It makes so much, you know. But there's no guarantee with all of that. It's all about positivity, believing in yourself. I mean, making a mistake doesn't make you a bad player. You know what I mean? I think bad players make a lot of mistakes. The best players in the world make mistakes. But
we'll be coming to that in a minute. We'll be coming to that in a minute, Alfie.
But Alan Hansen also said too, and I read his book, a player I greatly admired. Some of the younger kids don't remember, but he was a genius of a centre half. He says he doesn't remember playing a game without feeling nervous. It was the fear of not playing well that drove him. That's amazing when you think about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I'm going to try and play, see if this works. I want to just try and play something, and then we'll continue on. So Gary, if you could drop me a text really quickly that this is working okay sound wise, it should. But just to set the scene, this was a really interesting game. Pat, this is a half time for it was actually our Harry Cavan team, which is sort of was under 19s. That Gary was taken, but because it was under 19s, some of our 20s players were playing. So Alfie and I had gone along to sort of support, and it was against Portadown, big derby. We had a decent enough team, and obviously Portadown were huge favourites for the whole Harry Cavan. And we went with a fair degree of optimism that we actually could give them a game. And as the game unfolded, literally within about 17 minutes, we were 3-0 down to 10 men. Callum Ferris turned it on, a couple of wonder strikes, man sent off. And so after all the build-up, I mean, literally just deflation, 3-0 down to 10 men. And you're thinking, this could go to double figures. And how are you gonna deal with young players' mentality? So this was the sort of the end of the halftime team talk. And I think for those who are on, if you think of the scene, you know, down to 10 men, local rivals, just utter dejection, utter disappointment. And let's see if this plays. You know. Is that playing okay? Is it? Yeah.
No, nothing yet, DJ. No.
Nothing at all. No.
No.
All right. So it hasn't played then. Okay. Was no one here that at all? No.
No, David.
No one.
No.
No one was here that at all. No.
No.
Right. Okay. Then we'll forget about it. It hasn't played for some reason. Right. Let me move on to this, which should play okay. Okay. So we're talking about disappointments. Let's do this now, which should be interesting. Both Pat and Alfie mentioned disappointments there. So, and the question's been asked about mentality. I think it was maybe Callum Burns asked it, and hopefully these will play. But this is a video of each of the players, Alfie and Pat, sort of, let's just say, not the best game they had. And I'm really curious to see, for the players' benefit, as to how they dealt with it, what was said to them, but most importantly, how they dealt with the setback. So let's see, this hopefully will play. If I play sound and optimism. Right, let's see if this goes okay now. Fingers crossed. So go with you, Alfie, first. Again, Gary, if you just give me a shout, this should definitely play now. Is that playing?
No.
No.
No. Played last night, DJ, just when you went straight on to YouTube.
A rare goal for the Glentoran fullback.
I'll try that quickly. We'll just try it very, very quickly.
There's no picture.
There was sign there, but no picture, was there?
Yeah.
Right, 1 second, and I'll try this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll just move on. But this is quite interesting.
Maybe Alfie took the picture off.
Aye, maybe he's been in.
Just while you're doing that, DJ, I'll tell a quick one that I was actually, Alfie, I was saying to Pat on the phone, and I was saying to the players on Tuesday night when we were having the strength conditioning session about the time that I came down to meet yourselves after taking the Loughgall job on, and the 20s were playing Plunkett again in the Harry Cabin at Kernan. And I was just telling about how you had a conversation with the players in the changing room, and I came in and stood in the corner, and I was down to become the new manager of the 18s. And after listening to you for about 5-10 minutes and the passion, I was telling the players that I was actually looking to DJ for him to give me a kit, because there was that much passion and that much sense talk that I actually thought I would have run through a brick wall just for what you were saying. And I was telling the players, and luckily Mark Farrell and a few others were on, so it was good that they were able to back up, you know, just that mentality and that belief. And again, it didn't take a whole lot. You just spoke with sort of authority and passion and hunger. And as a coach, I was standing almost looking at DJ and saying, give me the number 7 here and I'll go on and win this game for you. So, you know, it's a big thing, how important mentality is.
It's big. It's so simplistic, though, I look upon it in a very simplistic manner. I suppose I speak in the way I like to be spoken to as a player. I mean, I played for Ronnie McFall for 13 years in total, out of my 21 years of playing. I would run through a brick wall for him. He believed in me. I believed in him. We shared a passion for the game, and it was as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see if this plays. And again, Gary, give me a shout early doors if this plays. Okay, so it's Portadown against Glentoran, semi-final of a big cup.
Michael Smith staying forward.
Is that working?
Court plays the ball in for Michael Smith. And it's 1-0 to the Glens. Michael Smith, the fullback. He's pushed up so effectively in this match so far. A rare goal for the Glentoran fullback. Run well for Stephen Livingston. Far post is O'Driscoll. And he's equalised. O'Driscoll from Dundee, one of Ronnie McFall's latest acquisitions, has paid back the fee. Divine forward for Hamill, perhaps. Alfie, Stewart, Hamill trying to get in there. Oh, Stewart has scored an own goal. The former Glen man, one of the most experienced defenders in the league. But what a howler. And no sooner reported out equal.
So, what was going through your mind, Alfie, when that happened? And how did you mentally, how did you cope?
Well, I felt like hitting Mickey a slap in the teeth. But you know, it's bitterly disappointing, David. You know,
hang on.
I have to be honest.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you now.
No, it's important to young boys. It's important to young kids, young fellas here tonight, that's the sort of thing happens to you as a defender, as a player. You know, it happened to me. I think I scored something like 9 OGs in my career. To think that as a player, I scored 18 goals, but scored 9 OGs. It doesn't say much about me, does it? But you know, you're bitterly disappointed. You know, I remember particularly that match. You were feeling at the top of your game, and then right slam bang in the middle of it, you score an OG, a mix up between you and the goalkeeper, communication problem. But you know, the match is still to be won. You know, I don't even think we won that match, but you still had a match. You can't surrender. You can't look to run away from it. You cannot look to get out of it. You just take it on the chin. It's one of many mistakes you'll make in your career. I always say to young kids when I'm talking, you know, if you score an OG, you probably 9 times out of 10 score an OG because you're in the right place. You're trying to defend. You won't score OGs if you're nowhere to be seen. That's the way I put it to young fellas, you know. Although in saying that, I'm blaming Mickey for he should have been where he should have been, you know. But you know, you tough it out. I mean, I remember. Here's one for you. I remember scoring an OG in a European game against Porto. How do you deal with it? I come back the next game. We're playing Glenavon. What did I do? Scored another OG. 2 matches in the trot. Did it affect me? Not really. You just get on with it. It's just one of those things. You tough it out. It's one of the many things that goes wrong for a defender. Goes wrong for strikers. They miss chances that can win games. It's painful at the time, but take it in the chin and on you go.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Obviously, people know I'm a bit of a Jose Mourinho fan, and I watched a bit of the match last night, and he was asked today about the mistakes made, and obviously, Lloris made a horrible mistake with Eric Dyer for a goal, but the media were on about with a third goal, and the young fella, I can't remember his name, but the young centre half. And Mourinho's response was phenomenal. He's like, listen, he had a super game, made that one mistake, but you know what? He's starting next week. Just as simple as that. Just he made a howler of a defensive error. But Mourinho was like, he's starting next week. And for the young player, that must be confident that the manager's telling the world, you know what? I have faith in you. You're starting next week, despite having an absolute nightmare of a mistake.
Before we bring Pat in, because no Pat will probably something to say this too, but let me take you back to the Irish Cup semi-final. Before I'd won an Irish Cup medal, I'm 19 years of age. I'm playing for Glentoran against Carrick Rangers, strong favourites to win the semi-final. I get substituted with about 15 minutes to go. Glens are losing the semi-final and will lose the semi-final. A big shock. I get booed off the pitch by my own fans at 19 years of age. Right? Mm-hmm. Ronnie McFall comes out the next day in the newspapers and praises me. He condemns the fans for giving me stick and praises me. From that moment on, I knew the manager believed in me. From that moment on, stick from the terraces never really bothered me. So it was all down to the manager. It was all down to his belief in me, which made such a difference.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, Pat, you're not going to escape the focus.
No.
You made your debut for Manchester United, as was mentioned there, and probably didn't quite go to plan. Hopefully, this will play. Let me see.
Well, that's an understatement, David.
Well, I'm trying to be nice. Let's see if this plays. Come on.
4th of October.
Yep.
Is that playing okay?
Yep.
Beckham outside of him. Beckham's cross. That's a lovely little cross, a dangerous cross. And it's McClare. Oh, just tipped over the bar by Kylie. They seem to be stuck in the air forever, that one. Good, confident tackle by McGibbon, the debutant.
So a wee bit of praise there from a confident
Yeah,
tackle.
there's, yeah.
Trying to get
I'll hold on to that, David.
This is still the first half. So if I can
by the
speed
man
up a
in
wee
the
bit
number
here.
7 shirt. No, it's not Cantona yet. It's Neville tonight. Barnes with a shot, takes a deflection. Oh, dear me! Wrong-footed Kevin Wilkinson. And York's.
See if I can go forward just slightly here for sake of time. Here we go.
McMillan. Arms go up, asking for offside. He wasn't, and that's got to be a penalty. Well, it's got to be a sending off, unfortunately, I think, for Pat McGibbon. I don't think there's any other alternative for the referee. Barnes had turned him, and the referee has no option other than to show the debutant red. And the night, which was going to be one to remember for Pat McGibbon, has turned into a nightmare for Pat McGibbon.
So again, mentality, topic for tonight. You've reached the pinnacle, Manchester United debut, going well, playing well. A mistake happens, it could happen. How did you cope with that mentally? And what was the dressing room like afterwards? And what turned to be sort of a bit of a bad night for the team?
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before, but to bring it into a bit of context, whenever that game was obviously played, we had a team of some experience and some new lads, younger lads that have come in, Davey, as the gaffer tended to do. I had never played in a centre half partnership with Pally. It was Gary Pallister that night, and in that particular instant, the ball was played over the top, and we tried to play offside, and the linesman didn't put the flag up, and then I had to chase back. Now, as I say, you have to make quick decisions in football, and I suppose as you go higher up the leagues, the quicker you have to make those decisions, and sometimes you get them right, sometimes you don't. It wasn't so much a tackle as actual bodily harm, for me to get sent off. But the whole idea of it, my thought process was whenever the offside flag didn't go up and I was chasing back, was to take the lad down outside the box, which later on it showed that it actually was outside the box. So that was a little bit of the context surrounding it. Now, after the game, obviously the gaffer gave us a bit of a rollicking, but this is, I suppose, going back to the Alfie talking about Ronnie as well. This is the good management, and this is the great managers as well. That particular night, he gave a bit of a rollicking to myself and the other teammates. But the following day, as soon as I got into the training ground, the gaffer called me in. Sir Alex called me in, and he says, "Well, how are you, son?" And I says, "Look, obviously disappointed. It was, huge to make your debut for Manchester United. Biggest career highlight ever. But obviously getting sent off." And he says, "I thought about it," and he says, "I probably shouldn't have played you with Pally." He says, "Pally doesn't talk as much as what Steve Bruce does." He says, "If it had played Brucey, it probably he'd maybe spoke a little bit more through the game." So the really strong part of management was that he's taking the pressure off me, and he was making sure that I didn't deal with it too negatively. And then as soon as that was the case, then we went and we did a few laps after, during training the morning after the game. And there was just banter amongst it. And again, that's the way players respond. And it's getting over those. And funny enough, like people will talk about that game and think, well, I didn't play many games after that. But actually it was my final year, Davey, where it was probably the most disappointing, because in 96, 97, I played the pre-season games, including the game against Portadown as part of my deal, and played all the pre-season games. It was going well, and went out on loan to Swansea under Jan Mulby, and played one game and went in for a tackle in training, and my knee went the opposite way. And at 5.5 months out in my final year at Manchester United, when I'd actually been going really well that particular year, and that's what the gaffer tended to do, put you out on loan because he wanted to see you getting experience. So I think it was more that disappointment. So yes, the York one was a moment, and it's something that you had to learn from and you gained experience from. But we talk about it, it's like that boxer where they get knocked down those are the learning experience. You learn a lot more, from those poor and bad experiences as well, but they're part of football.
Yeah, no, I thought that. So I want to bring Alfie in, sort of going on from that a bit. So the video clip Alfie was going to play, I don't know if you can remember it, but if you can recall that 3-0 down in a game, young players, expectations were quite high, excitement was high before the game, then bang, 3-0 down, 10 men, totally deflated. And you told a story about playing for a club. You didn't name the club, but one of the clubs you played for in Europe, if you can remember, and been 3-0 down, if you remember that story. But your message to the players that day was, this is football. You're going to get a lot more days like this, no matter what level you play at. You're going to have this, and you got to just man up and deal with it. And I thought from a youth development point of view, it was an exceptional halftime talk. So can you recall the story you told, if you don't mind telling it? And
I remember playing the Ports, our first venture into Europe. I was fortunate enough, I had played quite a few European games for the Glens, but for a lot of our boys, playing against Porto was some task. Okay, we didn't play them on their home ground because they were banned from the home ground, so there wasn't a massive crowd there. But I remember players, I could see players, again, it's a mentality thing, it's belief. I could see, in particular, our left back, Ian Curtis. Ian Curtis, Pat mentioned him earlier on, was a phenomenal footballer. Curly could probably have played in England. He had numerous opportunities to go, but again, mentality, maybe didn't fancy it. We went 3-0 down, David, I think at 15 or 20 minutes. And I mean, against Porto, with 5 Brazilians playing, there's 5 internationals, Brazilians playing on their side. And I'm saying to myself, wow, we didn't expect this. We expected them to toy with us for a while and come. And I looked at Ian Curtis, who was probably the best fullback I'd seen in Irish League football for ability and everything, And I'm basically looking around at him, and he's almost in tears. He's in tears and he wants off. He's begging to be taken off. And I give him an awful rollicking. I give him an awful touch. And I said, go get a grip of yourself. We've got to survive this. We're 3-0 down. We've got to put up a show here. We've got to fight our way out of this. And we did. Okay, the match finished 5-0. All in all, not a bad performance away to Porto. But the mentality, but I seen it early on at the pre-match meal, because I noticed he was nervous. I noticed he was afraid. Some players embrace it. Some players go under with it. You know what I mean? But as I said to the boys that day, and it was such a disappointment. Everything was deflated, David, at halftime. You remember it well. And we said to them, they're sink or swim here. Are you going to surrender to these guys? Are you going to go out in the second half? Are you going to fight? Are you going to prove your worth? Are you going to show these people? Are you going to show us what you're made of? And you know what? The second half performance that day was fantastic. We actually won the second half that day, I think. We actually were superb. We actually took the fight to them. We scored a goal. And I mean, I couldn't have praised them high enough at the end of that day. But it was all about learning about themselves in that moment. It was hard. I mean, I remember saying to that day, this is as hard as it gets. This is as hard as it gets. It's been a nightmare. You're feeling sorry for yourselves. You want out of this situation, but you can't get out of it. You've got 40 minutes, whatever it was to play. Let's see what you're made of. And they were superb. They were superb that day.
I think even the coaching staff from Portadown after that, Alfie, had commented that it was an absolute tale of two halves. That Portadown were absolutely battered the second half in terms of hardly even being able to get a touch of the ball.
That's right. A lesson for everybody, Gary, and the mentality side of it. DJ mentioned rightly about one player actually absolutely stormed it that day. And our guys, hadn't played really badly in the first half. But whether you played badly or not, you're 3-0 down or 4-0 down, and your backs are to the wall. It's a simple, it's a question that you're going to be asked of time and time again throughout your career, no matter what level you're at. Okay, your backs are to the wall. What am I going to do here?
Yeah. As you said that day, it's football, and a great message for players at every single level, right from our youth players right through. Ultimately, football is about the individual. At the end of the day, it comes down to the individual, and are you able to bring your best to the table? That's all it comes down to. And if you can't individually get yourself in the right mental state, well, the collective of the team is just not going to be successful. So we've got, I think, another sort of 5 or 6 minutes. I've got one more question I wanna pose, but have you anything else, Gary, you want to ask there? If anyone else wants to come off mute and make any comments.
That's DJ, fire you away, and then for the last 5 minutes, because there's a few on the chat, so we'll just open it to like a random Q&A. So there's 2 or 3 on the chat. We can get them to ask them, and then there's 1 or 2 left in the development group. Sure, and that'll do us.
Okay. Well, one question I had, and obviously I didn't actually think about this much, Pat, until we talked, and that was sort of the management side of mentality. So, I know you guys certainly have, and some of us were fortunate enough to play under some very, very good managers. And I suppose we have both played under Roy Coyle. Pat, I had a year under Roy Coyle way back in the, goodness knows, 95, 96 season for Ards in the old 8-team Premier League. And just an incredible mentality that man had. The most successful manager in Irish League, considering what he won at Derry City. Phenomenal. And Alfie, the team you played in had Barney Bars and Raymond Morrison and players like that. They were all at Ards at that time, obviously a bit older at the end of their careers. So this was a dressing room full of people that had won Irish Cups and leagues. And Pat, in terms of Roy Coyle, how did you find him at your time at Glentoran?
Yeah, Roy was very professional in the way that he went about things. The training was really, really good. I know that obviously I was coming back from full time to part time, and I had a couple of years at Portadown where we were very close to winning the title, but didn't succeed. And when I went to Glentoran, to be honest, it was as much about myself in terms of wanting to win a league title before I finished my career, my playing career. So you had a great mix, and Roy got a great mix of players there, and what he did was he fostered a winning mentality, and he was able to motivate, but he motivated, but he didn't say too much. There was a simple message with Roy, but and the other thing he did is he made strong decisions at times. I think it was the second last game of the season. We were playing Linfield in the second last game, which is now infamous, for Chris Morgan, the Chris Morgan day. We needed to win the game to have any chance then of winning the league, and he put Stephen Parker, who was a centre forward, and he put him in the midfield in that particular game, and everybody was sort of questioning it. And he got the decision right. So he was a real intelligent football man. He'd obviously played over in England as well, and he kept those contacts. I think he was in quite regular contact with Alex Ferguson as well. So he had a great insight into the game, and he managed players really well.
Yeah, he had a fear factor with him. Players didn't like. I know the Irish dressing room players didn't like him. They hated him as a person, but they respected him.
Yeah,
and I found that, and a very quick story before I go to Alfie. I tell this a lot to the youth players. I remember one night you trained at Ards Rugby Club, and we're doing the wee rondos at the start. And again, this is Paul Mooney, Barney Bars, Raymond Morrison. These guys have all won leagues for Linfield and Glentoran. And we're doing the rondos, and the same player, I think it was Michael Collins from Belfast. He got sort of 3 times in a row, got stuck in the middle. So everyone was laughing. And Coyle had set up the pitch what he wanted to do, and he walked over and lifted the ball and says, "Lads, you think this is funny? That's okay. We'll just run tonight." And we just started in these laps of 2 rugby pitches. And I can remember Paul Mooney and Barney Bars, 2 senior players, leaving the run to go into the middle to remonstrate with Coyle and say, "Listen, you've got it wrong. We weren't mucking around. It was just," and he just clear away off, and he ran. And I remember he stopped for a water break, and he walked over and he says, "Listen, I haven't seen too many players here have won 2 and 3 league medals in a row. And if you've won 3 league medals in a row, come and talk to me." Away you just go. And we ran for about an hour and a half that night. But just that stuck in my mind. That mentality.
That was teaching character as well. That was a character lesson as much as anything else.
Yeah. So Alfie, obviously running a fall, you had him at obviously the Glens and at Portadown, and you've obviously been under other managers. So what mentality wise, what did Ronnie bring to the table that you could sort of pass on to the players?
Just my early impressions of Ronnie were incredible. Let me tell you a wee story about whenever I was probably one of my first or second game as a kid. I'm scared stiff sitting in the changing room, so I'm getting changed. And Ronnie was a stickler for the appearance of his team. You know, Pat maybe understand what I'm talking about. I mean, if Ronnie was really preoccupied about how his team looked as well as how they played, you know. And I remember I was sitting and Ronnie noticed a wee pull or a hole in my sock, and he said to the kit man at that time, I think it was the late Davy Roberts. He says, "David, get him another sock." I mean, I had played in some rag bag outfits, my time, David, as a kid. It wasn't a hole at all. It was a stitch wrong or something, you know. And I said, "Oh no, it's okay, Ronnie. I'm happy enough." And he gave me an 8 and he says, "Get that sock off you." He says, "Get him another sock."
Yeah.
So there was an early indication of this man's mentality. You're going to go out to play. You're going to go out looking right. You're going to go out feeling right. And I'm going to do everything to make sure. Ronnie's philosophy was, when we turned up, we had nothing else. I mean, at both Glentoran and Portadown, you never had to take a thing with you other than your right state of mind. You turned up and there was shampoo at the club, there was towels at the club, your kit was at the club, training gear was at the club, everything was at the club. So you had no excuses when you turned up. You turned up to play. Nothing else to think about other than play. And that was a fantastic education. You know, all I had to do, and go back to the thing, I remember the players way back in the day, it used to be always shirt and tie. But some of the other clubs began to introduce tracksuits. And we were a wee bit envious. You know, clubs had the nice tracksuits. So we only got the tracksuits whenever we went to Europe, and then we were taking office again. But Ronnie, somebody said to her, I think it was wee Greg, who was he liked the shirt and tie, but wee Greg says, "Well, like, oh, big man, let us wear tracksuits and stuff." You know, he says, "No chance." And I said to him, "Why not? You know what I mean? What's your thing?" He says, "Because as a player, if you come to a match in a tracksuit, you put the tracksuit on a Saturday morning, what's different? If you're a player and you're putting a shirt and tie on an hour and a half or 2 hours before you go to the ground, you know what you're doing it for. You're going to play football." And that was his thinking. Put a tracksuit on, it's just another run-of-the-mill day. Put a shirt and tie on, you're going to play football. Interesting.
Yeah, Gary, maybe we can implement that through the whole of Loughgall youth, will we? Shirt and tie every Saturday morning. I'm not sure how that would go down.
I need to go and buy a shirt and tie then, DJ. Living tracksuits during lockdown here.
You know. So, Gary, any last questions then before I wrap up?
Yeah, well, in the chat we have Danver. Danver has a question.
Yeah, if he wants to unmute himself, he can unmute himself and ask.
Yeah, I think Pat and Alfie pretty much touched on it. My question was just in relation to, obviously, when you're playing in a match and you make that mistake, how do you get yourself mentally back on track to make sure that that doesn't affect your whole game? Obviously, as coaches, we see young boys that they make one mistake and then for the rest of the game they just can't lose that. That's it. It's their game's ruined. You know, what sort of is there wee triggers that you do to try and get yourself back on track, or what is it?
Well, do you mind if I start this, Alfie? Yeah.
Go ahead, mate. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So even in terms of from a management point of view, I mean, I do this actually with our kids. And when I first took over with the group at the 2002s that trained to be smart, what we did was we struggled. I had taken a group who had seen the previous year were with another team, and then that basically came a bulk to ourselves. And I think we lost the first game 9-0, and every time that a goal was scored, all I said was, "Let's go again, let's go again, and let's go again." And I think the words that you use are so important. So whether that's internally, and as we've talked about, we'll make mistakes in games. There'll be good moments, there'll be bad moments, but how do you actually internalize that, Denver, I think is really important. So if you do make a mistake, straight away, let's go again, because you can't let it affect you. And those that let it affect them are the ones that are going to maybe struggle as they go up the rung, because disappointments will happen, and how you actually internalize it is hugely important. All right. Yeah,
so true, Denver. I think it's when kids, especially kids, are making mistakes, well, even at an adult level too, at senior level, the vibe you get from the sidelines from your coach, the belief that you get is so important. But as Pat rightly says, the kids that are making constant mistakes and everything else, well, that's another issue altogether, you know what I mean? But I mean, certainly whenever I was a kid, when I think back how I would like to treat it myself, when you make a mistake, I remember again, go back to an OT, scoring an OT up at Distillery. It was a shocker. I don't know how I scored it this day myself, but anyway, I scored it. And I was done at halftime. Ronnie never mentioned it. it was so bizarre. He never mentioned it. We ended up winning the game 3-1. Was never talked about. So, yes, encouragement for kids that make mistakes, definitely, because it happens. And I think it's so important what information's fed from the sidelines at that moment and throughout that game. And let's see how they react. Let's see how tough they are. Let's see how they learn.
It was brilliant that you said, Alfie, because it was actually there was a podcast the other week. I don't know if anybody had listened to it, but Robbie Savage just took over like head of youth development at Morecambe, and they were interviewing Brendan Rodgers on a podcast, and Robbie Savage had said about a centre half that he had coached the team for ages to play out from the back, and the centre half had given the ball away to the striker 3 times. And Robbie was sitting sort of with this confidence as a player who had played and now is apparently, head of youth development. And he had said, so we had spoke about this in training and we'd done things, and I'd asked him to play it from the back. And rather than change his mind and make a decision himself on the pitch, he kept playing the same diagonal ball to the same fullback, and the striker was intercepting it. So I took him off with 5 minutes to go to half time. That podcast nearly ended. I've never heard Brendan Rodgers go as mad in a live podcast in my life. And he called Robbie Savage out, and he says, how silly was that? That kid will probably never recover from that. You've took him off before half time. You've made an issue of it. You've made a big deal about it. He says, could you not have done that a different way? Could you not have just let him be? You'd encouraged him to play out from the back. Let him keep doing that until he makes the same mistake, and then he's going to say to himself, this isn't working. I'm going to have to change what I'm doing, or, just look at it differently and be that where it's not the kid's fault, and don't let them believe that it's their fault. But it was just unbelievable to hear somebody from sort of Robbie Savage's, sort of background say that he had absolutely, Brendan Rodgers said he'd almost ruined the kid,
Yeah, it can happen. That can happen.
Yeah. And it's, as you're saying, it's as you both said, it's about letting them repeat it almost and just get on with it, and hopefully then they learn for themselves in a way.
Yeah, that's it, Gary. You said it right. The good players, the smart players, will learn very quickly. Nobody likes to make mistakes. The less we make, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Callum Byrne has a question. Callum, are you there?
Yeah, I just was one for Pat. I wanted to know, how did he mentally prepare himself to be playing alongside some of the best players in the world?
I think the biggest thing, Callum, with that would be first and foremost when you go over there, and I would have been quietly confident. Whenever I first went to Old Trafford and they were sitting beside people like Brian Robson, who was England captain at the time, and then some really experienced players. Of course, there's a certain amount of awe, and even you only ever see these fellas in Shoot magazine or on TV, but once you actually get on the pitch with them, you realise that they have 2 legs, you have 2 legs, and when it comes to it, you've just to work as hard as what they do. So I think it's that repeatability. Whenever you're training with them day in, day out, Roy Keane was over 2016, and Roy said that the training days were what got him ready for Saturday, because the training sessions that we had were actually harder than the games the majority of the times. So it was keeping that repeatability up and making sure that you were training properly, and just constantly listening to and observing all of those players. So those were the things that I always seen it. I always explained myself as being a grower rather than a shower. So I always grew into things, and I wasn't necessarily as outwardly confident as other lads, but I always was a good learner. I would have listened, I would have observed, I would have then repeated what they were doing, and then eventually that's where you gain confidence, and that's where you build up your confidence, by just repeating that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, cheers, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
I think, Gary, we'll have to. I think we're now at 8:30. I think we'll knock out the head, unless you've any one last one. Have you? Is that okay?
No,
I
it's
think
fine.
I think we're fine there. So,
Can I, Davey, before you wrap it, can I just say to Callum, I had the misfortune of playing against Pat with his Man United greats at Shamrock and they stuffed us 5-0, son. That was the other side of it.
Yeah. So I'll give Pat and Alfie like 30 seconds each, sort of mentality, mental health, and just last minute wrap ups, and then we'll conclude.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pat. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, all I would say is, it's important for the kids, especially, and the coaches that are on here, that it's all about the learning experience, and I think that's why something like tonight is brilliant. Whether it's the mentality and emotional side of things, or the technical and tactical skills, you should always be learning. I'm sure Alfie will tell you the same thing. We even at the very end of our playing careers, we were still learning the game. You never should think that you've made it, because the day that you think that you've made it is the day that you'll stop being a footballer. So that would be my final thing.
It's absolutely right. I mean, learning's everything. The one thing I'm very grateful for, Jerry Mullen was my travel companion. He was an international. He played at Everton as a young lad going up the road to Glentoran week in, week out. And I don't think I'd have made it as an Irish League player without his wisdom. Simple as that. He was feeding me wisdom day after day, telling me what was right, telling me what was wrong. And as Pat said, I just listened. I listened to everything I was being told and I implemented everything I was told to do, not only by Jerry, but by teammates. And this is very important. Maybe if there's, obviously for the kids that are listening, but also for the senior players at Loughgall, just impart good wisdom to those young players and tell them what they need to know. And young lads, just keep listening and learning and keep enjoying your football. The more you learn, the more you'll enjoy it. So you will.
Yeah.
I always say something, Alfie, and that when I do my talks, I'll always say, if you want to be successful, listen to successful people. It's not rocket science, but that's a big part of it.
That was my philosophy, Pat, when it came to putting the management team together for Loughgall 20s. So I can remember introducing Alfie. He was on board, and then Dara Peden joined, and obviously Dara, obviously Loughgall legend. And when I introduced, start of the season, and it was like Alfie Stewart, 21 senior medals. Dara Peden, I think in total Dara Peden has 27 medals at all the different levels. I never let him forget the one he got at Money Slaying, playing with me in the Alan Wilson Cup. That's his most important. I keep telling them. But so between Alfie and Dara, 48 medals. So how you turn things around is, I said to the lads, listen, 20, 21, 27, I managed 2. So between the 3 of us, with 50 medals. That's what you call it, leaning other people's success. That was that. So listen, on that note, absolutely fantastic. Pat and Alfie, brilliant, absolutely superb. So we'll come off the recording now. People want to hang about for a while and chat, that's okay, but we'll not record on the head. So tune in next week on the Facebook, Loughgall, you'll find out who the guests are. Unless you know offhand, Gary, can you remember offhand who next week is?
Next week is strength and conditioning and nutrition. So it'll be Kyle Foster.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the one for next week. So I'd say we'll definitely come off the save. But just to finish, Pat, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, if any of the young players maybe feel they could benefit from your train to be smart, can they get you on social media, or how do they get in touch?
Yeah, they can get me on social media there. We've got both the Train to Be Smart Facebook page and also on Twitter as well. So they can make contact in some way. There's no issue that way.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks, guys, for a fantastic night.